Hello everybody, we're going to be talking about healing debuffs in this video, because healing debuffs have become kind of controversial. A lot of people think they're not worth building. I say, actually, healing debuff items are really good right now, and two of them in fact are overpowered. How do I know that healing debuffs are actually overpowered? In patch 12.14, Riot is literally nerfing Chempunk Chainsword for being overpowered. It's just not that healing debuffs are bad, they're just not fun. Healing debuffs are fat, ugly, stupid, boring. Nobody wants to build them. Why does nobody want to build healing debuffs? Nobody has actually ever wanted to build healing debuffs. The only purpose to build a healing debuff is to stop your opponent from healing. They're uninteresting, they don't add anything to your kit, they don't give you anything, really. If I'm playing an AD carry, I want to build for example, Gale Force into Lord Dominic's Regards and into Infinity Edge. I don't want to stop and build a Mortal Reminder. Unfortunately, under the old healing debuff system, you were taxed a Mortal Reminder just because your opponent happened to be Warwick or Aatrox or one of those champions. And that's just not fun or interesting. So of course, Riot nerfed healing debuffs and they made the item stat sticks. This, unfortunately, has still not made them interesting. Chempunk Chainsword, despite being very overpowered, is still not interesting. No one built it and it was overpowered. How do we know it was overpowered? On Hecarim Jungle, just as one example, we can see Chempunk Chainsword had a 6% higher win rate than any other one of his normal picked items, a massively higher pick rate, and despite that, people still didn't really want to build it. Why is Chempunk Chainsword so overpowered? Gives 55 damage, 250 HP, 25 ability haste for a mere 2600 gold. In other words, this item was 125% gold efficient without even the healing debuff. Despite that, it's boring. Stat sticks are boring. They don't do anything. They don't really contribute to anything. They're not fun, interesting, nothing. However, with all this said, I do want to remind everybody to like, subscribe, leave a comment down below. If you agree with any of these thoughts, if you disagree with any of these thoughts, just go ahead and leave a comment. Both of them help me and both of them will push discussion. Yay! Anyway, there is one healing debuff item. One healing debuff item that stands above all the others is actually being interesting and fun to build. Thornmail. Thornmail is the only healing debuff item that does anything other than just be a stat stick and reduce healing. You can check that, by the way. Chempunk Chainsword is just a stat stick that reduces healing. Thornmail is a stat stick that reduces healing. Oh, and it's got this unique Thorns passive that's really cool and fun. Mortal Reminder is a stat stick that reduces healing. Morellonomicon is a stat stick that reduces healing. Chempunk Petrifier is a stat stick that reduces healing. I hope I make my point here. In fact, Mortal Reminder is such a boring stat stick that its primary user is Garen. That's right, Garen Top is a primary user of Mortal Reminder. A champion who barely even auto-attacks is one of the biggest users of the auto-attack healing debuff item. He doesn't auto-attack much, and he doesn't even like healing debuffs, because he just ults and kills people. And he's the biggest user of Mortal Reminder. If the fact that Hecarim is first iteming this champion into non-healing champions, and Garen is the only big user of Mortal Reminder, those should be, on their own, really good evidence that this entire healing debuff system has failed. But I have come up with an idea, at least for 3 of these healing debuff items, to make them more interesting and to make more people actually interested in building them. So, much on the line of Thornmail, Thornmail actually became more balanced as an item by giving it a healing debuff. That one is actually true. Mortal Reminder initially just did a shitload of damage to anyone who attacked it. Or Thornmail initially did a shitload of damage to anyone who attacked it. This made it quite imbalanced, because if you went an item like if you went an item like Bloodthirster into Thornmail, you would outheal the damage, but if you didn't, you would take too much damage to actually attack Thornmail. So they reduced the damage that Thornmail does considerably, but gave it a healing debuff. Far more balanced for both sides and far more interesting. Then, by giving it the immobilizing enemy champions also gives them a larger healing debuff, they gave it active gameplay. If you get CC'd by a tank, you get a big healing debuff. If you attack them, you get a smaller healing debuff. There's so many, like Thornmail is actually such a well-designed and balanced item over time. It's just become so well-designed and balanced. It's actually kind of crazy that it's right next to Chempunk Chainsword, which gives a shitload of damage and ability haste and health and reduces healing. And that's it. That's all it does. Look at how interesting and cool Thornmail is. And then look at Chempunk Chainsword. It like does a lot. Yay. So what would I suggest then? What would I suggest to make these items actually more interesting? Well, I came up with some ideas, and these ideas aren't infallible, but I hope they get the idea across that if you actually balance these items on having a healing debuff and base them on having a healing debuff, that they'll become more interesting items. More people want to build them, they'll fit into more builds, they'll enable more builds, and they'll make the game fun, and people might enjoy building them. So if we're gonna put Chainsword, the cost goes to 2,800, we assume that. The health goes to 300, the damage goes down by 10. So the health goes up by 50, the damage goes down by 10. So this is overall a nerf. But in return, on a 5-second cooldown per target, you steal 5% health from the target with less than 50% health. So every time you attack a champion with less than 50% health, you heal 5% of their health pre-mitigation, or maybe you heal 5% of your health. I don't know. This is a work in progress idea. And then you deal that much damage on a 5-second cooldown. So the purpose of this item would be to run into a team fight, to AoE as many people as you can, reduce their health, get some healing, give them a healing debuff, just overall be this giant team fighting tank thing, which is generally what bruisers want, right? Everybody gets that. And I think that would overall make this item far more fun for everyone, because it wouldn't just be this giant stat stick where you could first item it on champions and just use it as a giant stat stick. It would actually lend itself towards builds for champions like Hecarim, Renekton, etc. Champions who actually want to be in a team fight, AoEing, outlasting people, reducing healing so they can't be out-healed. It would make it fun and interesting. I'm not so concerned about the balance. Those numbers can be adjusted. I don't really care. But the idea is people would want to build this item. People would look at this item and they would say, yes, I want that on my champion. So next is Mortal Reminder. Now the problem with Mortal Reminder is that it's a stat stick. Much like Chempunk Chainsword, its best user is Garrett, which just, it doesn't make sense. So I came up with an idea for Mortal Reminder. Increase the damage to 30 from 25, increase the cost to 2,800 from 2,500, but make it so damaging a champion below 50% health applies minus 40% healing, and applies a 25% decaying slow over 1 second on a 5-second cooldown. In other words, much like how I would make Thornmail, or much like how Thornmail gives a healing debuff as a sustained damage item that wants people hitting you, and you don't want to be out healed by slowly whittling them with Thornmail, and much like I would make Chempunk Chainsword based around AoEing people down below half and healing off it and reducing their healing so that they couldn't out heal your AoE teamfighty shit, I would make it so Mortal Reminder is more of a kiting item. And the point of Mortal Reminder would be to kite champions out, particularly champions who've been in a team fight, who've been hit, to reduce their healing, to slow them down, to try to get kills on them, stuff like that. Give it a little bit more base stats, increase the cost so it's not just a healing debuff. And I think that this would be, I mean, maybe the cooldown should be like 3 seconds on the slow, but you get the idea, right? It would basically be like if you guys remember the original Frozen Mallet, it would try to be a damage version of the original Frozen Mallet that tries to kite people out, tries to reduce healing. Maybe you could finkle around with how you applied the slow. I don't really know, but the idea would be there to be a ranged kiting item that reduces healing, so that as you're doing lower damage than other items, you're doing less damage than Collector, you're doing less damage in Lord Dominic's Regards, but in return, you're getting a healing debuff, and in return, you're getting a slow to continue to kite more. And I think that would make it a more interesting item, and I think that would make it a more interesting, buildable, fun item. If I was playing Callista, for example, and maybe this would be overpowered, I don't know, but if I was playing Callista, and if I, had a shield bow into Mortal Reminder, I could be kiting people a lot more. I could be slowing them a lot more. I could be doing more interesting things. And I think that would make it a more interesting buildable item. For Morellonomicon, this item is boring as fuck. It's really, really boring. But the main users of Morellonomicon are champions who go Leandries, champions who go Demonic Embrace, champions who don't want to be out-healed. Their damage is more over time. They're susceptible to being out-healed. And I thought to myself, how could you make Morellonomicon actually interesting and cool and build into more of this AP Bruiser grind set? How could you make Morellonomicon build with something like Morellonomicon, Rylai's, Demonic Embrace, Riftmaker, stuff like that? How could you make this work? And I thought to myself, shouldn't it really be more of a sustained damage item that punishes people for staying in melee? Shouldn't it be more of an AP Bruiser item? And that's what I thought. AP reduced to 75 from 90. Ability haste increased to 15 from 0. Health increased to 400 from 300. So it'd be 400 HP, 15 ability haste, 75 ability power. A solid AP bruiser stack of stats, right? Increase the cost to 3,000, because obviously. But then make it so every time you deal magic damage to a champion, for 3 seconds, you reduce their healing and shielding by 10%. But every second, it stacks up by another 10% up to 40%. So after 40 seconds of combat, or sorry, after 4 seconds of combat with a champion, you reduce the healing and shielding for the rest of the fight, as long as you're dealing damage. You're reducing their healing and shielding by 40%. I think that sustained damage mages in particular tend to have lower damage, tend to deal with things like force of nature, tend to have issues with shielding in particular, and tend to have issues with healing in particular. And I think that this would be a really good way for AP bruisers to have some utility that other classes couldn't bring. Just in a giant AoE, applying a giant 40% healing and shielding decrease would be good. The ability haste would be good. The AP reduction would keep it, more balanced towards its role. The health increase would be good. And I think that this item would then give it crazy synergy with many other mage items. If you're going with more of a Riftmaker sustained damage build, then you can have Morellonomicon. If you're going with a Leandri's build, then you can also have Morellonomicon. If you have Demonic Embrace, Morellonomicon. If you have Rylai's, if you're perma-slowing people. I mean, I'm imagining a Swain with Rylai's and Leandri's and Morellonomicon, just AoE slowing everybody, reducing all their healing and shielding. Does that sound unfun for you? That probably does sound unfun for you. But if I was the one playing it, it would be very, very fun for me. And it would give people a unique item and a unique playstyle that they could go for, that they would actually be excited to build. Not just, oh no, I'm fighting Warwick, might as well go Morellonomicon because I'm fighting Warwick and that's what I do. I get taxed one item that I didn't want to build that doesn't contribute to my build, but rather I'm going to go Morellonomicon because it's fun and I want to. And yeah, so those are 3 items that I think could have changes to make them more interesting, to make sustained damage builds more buildable. Particularly, I think sustained damage AoE builds for bruisers are hurting right now, and I think that AP bruisers have been hurting for a very long time. Champions like Singed would love the new Morellonomicon. The ability to actually reduce healing and shielding, so one enchanter can't just make all your sustained damage go away, would be very nice. I think that this would also, in a competitive setting, give these champions more utility and more reason to be picked on a team comp, that they could do more and contribute more. And I think that this would actually open up different team comps and stuff like that. And I think, again, the main point of all these changes is to make these items more comparable to Thornmail, to make these items more like items that are fun and interesting to build, that when you complete them, you think, yes, I got that item. Now it's fun, not just, I'm fighting Warwick, here's my Warwick tax, now I have less items, but hey man, at least Warwick can't out-heal me, yay. And I think that's the point of this, is we shouldn't be at the point where Chempunk Chainsword is being nerfed because people are building it because they just want all the stats. They don't even want the healing debuff, they just want the giant stat stick of Doom, because that's where we're at. And that's where healing debuffs are at. They're so goddamn boring that realistically, the only way people are interested and have any fun building them is when they give such an unreal amount of stats that you build them anyway. And by the way, I did tell you guys, I did say that healing debuffs were still good. Everyone's like, no, they don't even do anything at 40%. They're bad. And oh, shut up with you whiners. But yeah, I think as a whole, this would make the game more balanced, more fun, more interesting, better designed, and yeah, so that's my take. What do you guys think on that? Would that be a good idea? Would that be a bad idea? Would that be unfun? Would that be fun? Would that be cool? Would that be interesting? That's the whole point. I will go over patch 12.14 later, but I did want to make a video on this topic in particular because I think that healing debuffs as a whole have no purpose right now. Remember, Chempunk Chainsword was added and then it just became a stat stick because it has no purpose. It wasn't added with a purpose. If you remember this, Chempunk Chainsword was never added with a purpose. It doesn't do anything. It's just stats and healing debuff. It was added practically, it's an afterthought. If it got removed from the game, few people would even notice. And I think they should go back and make sure that these items have a purpose other than just being boring. So thank you for watching. Thank you to all my Patreon supporters. You guys are brilliant. You can join my Patreon from the link in the description below, and that supports me immensely. Special shout out to all my YouTube members. You guys are great. Thank you as well. Thank you to everyone who likes this stream, leaves a comment, anything like that. Those all help me immensely. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.